Good morning. It's Vijay here. Today is Monday, 9th March 2026, and we are staring at an oil shock. Oil, which was just trading around 80s just last week, has moved to 120 today on the Brent. Brent crude has moved close to 120, 118 and odd. So I think everybody is shocked. Actually, the smart money has been buying for quite some time, and we have been mentioning that we should be in natural resources in 2026. I had specifically pointed out about oil in the first week of January, saying that oil is going to be a surprise packet, and when it moves, it will move like a woman's corn, is what I use. So it has exactly done that. So the question is, what do we do next? So let's just quickly analyze. I'll just share two pieces of information. So let's try to understand who are these oil producers, which which country is having what share. So if you look at data, United States is the biggest producer of oil in the world, 22%. Next is Saudi Arabia, 11%, and Russia, 11%, Canada, 6%, China, 5%, Iraq, 4%, Brazil, 4%, United Arab Emirates 4%, Iran is 3%. So what do you find? I mean, what do you notice? 73% comes from these top 10 countries, led by United States. Most of us would have thought that most of oil would come from the Middle East. That is not true. For instance, if you really look at it, the biggest oil producer is 11% from the Middle East, which is Saudi Arabia. And if you look at Iraq, which is now under U.S. Occupation, you could say, so it is controlled by US. Then you have Iran, which is also, in my opinion, will get controlled by US. So you really don't have too much of oil coming out from the Middle East as most people would normally think. So if you just analyze it carefully, the shock is there surely, because you see there is nearly about 20% is coming from Middle East. So the 20% people would think that 20% will come to zero, which it is not. Practically, if you look at it, it will not happen. So therefore, it is actually not as bad as the shocking numbers look like. So that is point number one. So let us see what history has said. For instance, if you go back to the Ukraine war, which happened. Now there was a steady buildup of oil from 2 3 months before that. At $70, it slowly moved on. On the day Russia attacked Ukraine, that day oil was 105. Within a few days, a couple of weeks, it went up to 138. So there was a rally of 35%. From the bottom of 70, it was a close to 100% rally. Now let's look at what's happened here. Beginning of this year, oil was around $59. We had said around $60 is the time to buy. We were lucky to get into the natural resources stocks. We didn't buy oil particularly. We bought natural oil resources stocks like Oil India, ONGC, and Hindustan Oil Exploration, and Vedanta. With these four are there in there, the producers of oil. So now after that, it's steadily going up, and suddenly last week, just before the US invaded Iran, not invaded, sorry, US and Israel bombed Iran, oil was 75. Today we are staring at a 120 number. So from 75 to 120 is a 60% rise. There's a 60% rise within the last 1 week. Where compare this with a 35% rise between the Ukraine war starting and the peaking out. So a lot of people would have been caught on the wrong side. Now, the share of Middle East is 33%. I said it is 22%. Sorry, it is 33%. If you go back here, 33%. Out of that, Iraq 4%, Iran 4% is, I would say, control of the US as of now. Iran is not in control, but as I mentioned yesterday, they will probably strike a deal with Iran so that 4% also will come under the control of Iran. Plus, you have Venezuela, which is pumping oil now. This is dated last year's data. In fact, it's 24's data, I suppose. But whatever it is, we don't have the latest data. This is the latest data which I have put. So Venezuela would have been in the top 10 or will be in the top 10 this year. So share of Middle East will come from 33 to minus 8, which is 25, and plus with Venezuela coming in, it will come to around 23. So around 20 to 25% is Middle East, even at the latest levels. And Iran has gone up from 1.5 billion, from $1.5 million per day to now they have cranked it up to $4 million. So these numbers will change. And broadly, US will remain number one, and The US controlled will be around 8 to 10%, which is about 32%. One third will be coming from US or US controlled. Then you have got Western countries like Canada. Then you have South America, like South American country like Brazil. China, of course, has its own trip. It's got its own 5%, and Russia, which is 4%. So again, I come back to this chart. The chart clearly indicated that at that point of time, the smart money bought at 70 and they offloaded most of it when it reached 100%. So if I assume smart money has bought at 60, at 120, they're most likely to be offloading rather than buying fresh, because this problem of Middle East would have been known to the smart money somewhere in January itself. So what are we doing? We were holding natural resources stocks. We will now sell natural resources stocks today onwards, maybe in the next couple of days. Generally, I believe that this shock may continue for a couple of days or maybe even a week. I don't think it will extend beyond a week. If you look at what it happened in Ukraine, and as I said, Ukraine was a surprise to a lot of people because it was supplying to Russia, supplying to Europe, and there were sanctions. Here, the case is different, but the percentage has gone up much higher from 75 to 120, which is 60%, and is equivalent to the smart money buying when it bought during Ukraine, that they got 100% there. Here also they got 100%. I don't think this will last. Of course, the oil prices may not come back to 80s. They may remain between 80 and 100 is my understanding, because finally Trump wants oil prices to be higher. This will also benefit the GCC countries, because Saudi Arabia itself, the break-even for Saudi Arabia is about $70. Now, if they get more than $70, they'll be very happy. Of course, their safety is the one concern. But in terms of oil prices, our strategy is simply to sell on rally, and which we are starting today. Whatever you do today, I hope it is successful. Thank you for joining.